Hey you, welcome back. Thanks for joining us here, Simply Worldbuilding. I'm Tyler, the guy on the left.
And I'm Bill, the guy on the right.
So today we're gonna slide across the ocean there and take a quick peek over at the city-states we've got. I think that probably for this episode we will take a look at sort of identifying some specifics about a specific city-state, and then we might dip into a little bit about sort of how they formed and how they work and their identities and that type of thing.
When it comes down to identifying a city-state, I think we should, get to a bit of a theme, because I think we were talking about, like, they might have, like, their own sort of one of these giant monsters that they kind of identify with, or things like that. So picking out a few of those would be probably advantageous, because it'll be a huge part of a certain one's identities as well.
So were you thinking like one of the large ones that is sort of notorious around the globe, or like a specific type, like maybe one is like, oh, we're the flying monster guys, or what were you thinking for?
Well, they probably, I was thinking they not one that's like globally, so it's not one that's going to be, again, across the ocean or separate from them, because since they're up against the, like, strange amplification, like the wilds that way, they're going to be, like, kind of hunting these things, and that's sort of what we were establishing, and so it's probably, like, one that they've actually managed to kill, use, and so just as such, like, the magical identity of that creature has sort of leaked out into the society itself, and like how they use pieces of it, or whether they hunt other similar ones, or it can vary, because there's going to be quite a few of them. But that's sort of what I meant by, like, the integration of the monster identified into the society.
Yeah, they're like the Pokemon towns all theme themselves with electricity, because that's the gym they got there.
Yeah, totally.
Okay, sounds good. So when it comes to a city-state, and probably anybody watching this is going to have, this level of knowledge at the very least, is that a city-state is, it functions very much like a nation, except that it's based out of one city, a city-state. So rather than having like let's use real-world example, like Liechtenstein. It is Liechtenstein, the city, and then surrounding areas. Whereas if you look at like France, then it's this sprawling place with a bunch of different cities, a bunch of different villages and stuff like that, and all the surrounding lands.
That all share in a bit of an identity.
Yeah, but functionally they operate very much the same way. So we've got this big collection of city-states here that we were thinking kind of like dissolved and have this competitive and occasionally actually violent relationship with each other, but that is going to vary depending on city-state to city-state and their specific interactions with each other, because there's going to be different relationships between different ones.
Yeah, so they were originally a singular country and entity, and then it was a conflict between all of them that sort of separated them. Yeah,
so my idea was that like at one point, ages and ages ago, this had been one nation, with, like, let's just say a king, some kind of ruler.
Yeah.
Maybe they had, like, a handful of just shitty rulers in a row.
Yeah.
And people got fed up with it, but nobody could quite decide how they wanted it to look, and they couldn't necessarily overthrow the entire empire by themselves. So
if you end up doing that, you're still going to have the other set of people who disagreed with you anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay.
But when you've got these mass, like, riots and people that want to break the establishment the way it is, but not the power to, on an entire nation level, overthrow the system as it is, and also have misaligning views. They sort of just ended up with, like, okay, we got this one city under our control, let's prop up some sort of new leader and set things the way that we want them. And so you end up with these, like, 2 dozen different cities that are all in charge of their own cities now, but are not able to agree and therefore form a significant nation. And one of the things that we were talking about was like, why do they not get along with these larger, essentially city-states, the triplet cities that are a little bit further over to their east? And so I was thinking, in order to encourage some strained relationships between them and have a little bit of intrigue, some of these city-states are still loyal to the same lineage of like rulers that had previously ruled. And they have, like, the capital city district state, and then A handful of the surrounding ones are semi-detached, but loyalist-like nations that are still sort of Holy Roman Empire-esque, like a functioning unit, but separate identities.
Okay.
And that their leaders could be like working hand in hand, or possibly even like chosen by the ruler of this X nation, the king somewhere in the center there.
Okay.
And they sort of form like almost a wall or a band that sort of separates these democratic or whatever city-states from the triplet cities, so that there's still like kind of that tension and disconnect from them physically, as well as, you know, socially, culturally, whatever.
And then there's the ones that have sort of broken off and become entirely independent.
Totally, yeah. And they now have, you know, some of them may be straight up democratic in the way that they actually hold their own elections and everything like that. And some of them may have other forms of government, but they're all doing their own distinct thing. Whereas the sort of collection of multiple of them that are still loyalist, at least somewhat still follow the directions of the same lineage of rulers that previously ruled.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting idea. I think what would end up making it sort of even more interesting is if whatever conflict happened that ended up splitting them up happened like such a long time ago, that like you have this sort of amalgam, but that sort of follows the original lineage in a way. But even that has become like a misunderstanding of what it originally was. You know what I mean? Because I think they're loyalists to the lineage, so why are they not just a singular state? Why are they separate from each other?
Yeah.
And so it might be interesting if it's sort of like rising from the ashes of the conflict before, kind of like Caesar's Legion in Fallout New Vegas, where they're very inspired by the Roman Empire, but they kind of don't get it because their understanding of it is limited to what information they have, and so it's sort of becoming that, and they've taken each of these city-states sort of under their wing, and like it's their own territory, and they're sort of claiming it, and that's why they're like semi-independent, because it's kind of fresh of like the reclamation. And that also would make sense why the ones that are going to be outside on the fringes that are completely independent are going to be so different, despite the fact they were originally part of the original cohesive unit. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah, I mean, I like it. Kind of what I had in my head worked out was that I kind of envisioned it as like when, you know, like 75% of your nation has already split off, seceded, like in open rebellion, and you've got this king who's just grasping at straws, trying to keep himself not only protected, but keep some level of control or land left, trying to keep some of this kingdom like stable, functional. Is that these people who, like these other cities that may very well have been like, yeah, you know what everybody else is, let's kind of get our own thing going here as well. They were sort of like, okay, like you can have control or whatever of your city. Like I'll give you that. I'm a gracious king. I'll give you your freedom if you stay in the alliance. Like we'll make it a new thing or whatever. And so kind of like bit the bullet and like gave them their land in exchange of like
turn from a kingdom into an alliance. In a sort of way. It's like, okay, well, you have ownership over yourself, but
like a commonwealth. Like in the same way that, like, I mean, I don't have a great extensive knowledge on this, but like the English Empire to the English Commonwealth, where like, you know, instead of like fighting every single person that wanted to be independent, they just, you know, like with Canada, sort of at the end of that whole thing, they were like, okay, yeah, you can be your own nation. I'm not going to fight you on it, but stick around. Like, you know, we'll work together. Kind of
print our queen on your money.
Exactly. So kind of that sort of thing. Okay,
fair enough.
Envisioning.
Yeah, no, that kind of makes sense. And then a little bit different because in this, again, the real world history example you're giving, that was just like, we left and then fought about it, to put it as simple as possible. But in this case, they were originally a single unit, and then some sort of conflict decided to divide them, and so that's a little bit of a difference. But yeah, I still see what you mean with the metaphor for sure. No, that's definitely a cool idea, especially because it adds like a sort of level of ancient history to this place, and then like again, like you have this history, and then also a modern interpretation of the history. That's a cool way to add intrigue or like the unreliable narrator to a like a reader or player. Like that's one thing. Like if you're playing like a D&D game, one fun thing is like, oh, we go to the library and we're trying to do research on this ancient lich or ancient god or something like that that's relevant, and maybe we have to fight it or have to go do this. But your characters, as they roll or start to basically ask questions like, what am I researching about this? What do I find? You can give them almost right information. And it can, depending on how they roll or something like that, or even in a book, how much you want to maybe have a bit of a surprise come later. Unreliable narrators within historical information is a really cool way to add intrigue. It makes the information feel kind of more real despite its lack of truthfulness. Because this is the thing, is history is just the biggest game of telephone in existence. So it's definitely just a cool way to make things feel real.
Biased information is always really interesting in, a book or a game or whatever, because it shows different motives, as well as like giving you more or less the information, but also what somebody kind of wants to get across for whatever their benefit or whatever may be.
Well, that's another cool, interesting point too, is like what they want to get across, because it's like, okay, you can have a whole bunch of facts, but the way someone says it to you, the way it's written, is they're going to be putting certain facts in front of your face as the forefront, and maybe it's just because merely that's the topic, or maybe they have an agenda. But again, that's another way to make this stuff feel more real, because history's full of agendas, and so including those can be interesting, because if you have two books about the same topic, one from one empire, one from another, your players or readers will have to cross-reference information and figure it out for themselves, which is a fun process.
Yeah, and that can very much still be the case with these city-states. Like, maybe the story that this like loyalist faction, the Crown, is trying to push forward is that like they all decided to like stay because the strength of the Empire is the strength of all of us or whatever. Like, like stay as a team because it's better for everybody and the Crown is strong and all that. But meanwhile, they literally had to just make concessions and like give them whatever they want in order to keep them there, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But over time, that's going to sort of fizzle away. And now you've kind of got the story is that, they chose to stay. Even though, if
they chose to stay because you bribed them.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah, so I think that kind of answers a lot of our questions about, like, sort of how do these function and why do they function like that, is by tossing in this old ancient conflict, and now there's sort of like, kind of almost like two sides to the conflict, except that each of them has their own agenda still.
Yeah.
Like this one side, these like separatist nations, still all have their individual like things that they're going for.
And will still fight amongst each other.
Exactly. Yeah. But they're like a little bit more like motivated to work with each other versus these guys that like have been their enemy or whatever. And then the loyalist nations may more or less work together, but again, they still have their own motives. They still have to do what's best for them. And so they may like bicker and stuff and have their court drama or whatever. And then there's also a lot of reason for the separatists and the loyalists to fight, especially between themselves.
Yeah.
And then it also kind of separates a huge chunk of these nations that maybe do want to actually have good, like positive political, like, or international relationships with like the triplet cities and everything else like that, or with the rest of the world, but are cut off by these other nations and this sort of band of like ancient enemy loyalist nations. So it kind of creates a whole lot of just extra layers of messiness that is exactly what I wanted out of just a whole schwack of city-states.
Yeah.
Just the messiness.
Yeah. I love the idea. I just love the idea of like the separatist city-states, like they start to separate, and then like one of them's like, oh, but we're still friends, right? And it's like, no. Just because I didn't want to be part of him doesn't mean I want to be part of you. Like, it's just like, oh, we're not friends. I just hate that guy. But yeah, so it does kind of create a bit of a faction system within while still dividing them, and so I think that can be an interesting idea too. Yeah. And it also does give a reason why the sort of triplet city-states were also sort of separate, because they even obviously went off to go do their own thing, but still decided to be friends, unlike the guys on the other side. And so yeah, it's actually almost a 3-faction system in a way. But yeah, it's a cool way to kind of cut it up in a way that's a little bit more digestible before you get into like the absolute multitude of them.
Yeah.
We were thinking that the sort of separatist city-states, we were going to put them on the fringes of those
on the
wilds.
western side, that is going to put them closer to things like this giant inhospitable desert.
Yeah.
And then also the just straight up like outlands, like wilderness, where they're going to be sort of the buffer between civilization and whatever it is that's creating these horrific mutated monsters.
Yeah. The sort of idea was that they were going to sort of revere these beasts, or are they still hunting them and just merely using their magic as tools?
I was thinking that there could be a certain like subpopulation of people that do sort of revere these things, but because they're also at the forefront of like the clash with these things, that probably won't be the popular opinion, because like, you know, all is fun in games and you can say, oh, they're so beautiful and mystical and whatever, until they run through your town square and eat your children and stuff like that. So that's probably not going to be like,
I mean,
you know,
it could be like a cult almost.
Yeah, well, 100%.
Yeah,
100%. Yeah, I was definitely thinking of having some people that very, very strongly believe this, even if they see some of the bad stuff that happens, because maybe it's for a greater good. Like, there's tons of things you can do with that, but that definitely doesn't. I don't think that should be the like top ideology in these places, because I still think that it's going to be very obvious to most people that not only are these bad, or at least most of them are bad, but also it's very, very profitable as well to kill them. So there's probably not going to be a lot of people, or not the majority of the population.
Like I said, it'll be a small sect, a small cult of people who kind of probably make their way out into the wilderness in order to sort of worship these things.
But this could also be like, there could be a reason why, despite them being less numerous, they are still very strong and stick around, because maybe they have something physical that gives them sort of strength, like that they've, you know, claimed one of these pieces that gives them some kind of strength, or maybe one of these things has some sort of like connection with them on a non-physical level that gives them some sort of strength as well to continue.
Well, I had an idea just now. What if they're not just going to be a small cult, which is going to be like, you know, probably a collective populace of like people from several of them agreeing on a singular topic, what if there is a single one of these city-states that reveres these things, but it's because because we were thinking about like dividing sort of the identity of these states by one or maybe just a few of like these creatures that they hunt. What if one of these city-states has a beast that has some sort of psychic ability, and so they revere not only it but all of them, because this thing's probably taking a certain level of control over the populace, but it also has the ability to tame other ones. And it's the only thing that can do that, because it's one of them. And so it's sort of, they keep bringing more of them in and sort of taming them in a way. To everyone else, this seems crazy. Why and how can you do that? But it's this sort of secret psychic entity that's allowing them to be able to do that.
Yeah, I like that a lot. So let's say that like maybe for one of these city-states that you're right, they had captured this thing, they had killed it, they had, you know, harnessed its energy or something like that, and now it's like sort of seeping out and still like post-mortem almost like influencing these people, which created like either like a cult or something like that. But then as it sort of gets more and more people under its influence, that they like created, you know, like a democratic party or whatever, and then got actually put in a position of power, which lets them spread it so much more through misinformation or propaganda or whatever. And so now that like maybe like it was like a sort of almost like a brainwashing thing that's now almost so big that like it really has just become the identity of one of these city-states, where they just are straight up an entire city-state is just pro these creatures.
I wasn't even thinking post-mortem, but that's a dope idea. Like they actually hunted it, because I was thinking like it just kind of walked in, or like they brought it there or something like that. But yeah, the idea that it somehow still exists, like its mind still exists in a vacuum almost, but despite the body being dead.
Because picture like, let's say like, oh, they got this big successful hunt because they never have been pro monster before.
Yeah, this is pre-conflict almost. Yeah,
and then they like drag this thing in and they put a building up around it to protect it from other people or prying eyes, and then you've got like this like night crew of people that are like trying to chisel pieces off of like this
do
like
experiments,
skull.
or something
and so they're
like that.
one person's like chiseling pieces off or whatever, and then this like skull just kind of starts like speaking to them or something like that, and like that's the patient zero is that crew, and then the influence sort of starts spreading, and maybe like it starts talking to other people like telepathically.
And that could be also an interesting thing too, is if it doesn't, because I was initially thinking that it had like this sort of cult-like psychic control over the entire town, but it might be even more interesting and create again a little bit of conflict, but I want the control to be almost absolute. But the fact that like it started out as a brainwashing mind control sort of thing, but then like again it infected more and more, and now it's got a decent chunk, but realistically you only really need to convince about maybe 20% of the population of something before it starts to just socially
become a culture.
It socially seeps out and then becomes that.
I don't think I was even thinking that like everybody is brainwashed, but there's definitely a population of people who are, and then beyond that is just kind of been pushed so much and become like a social norm, that like brainwashed or not, you kind of have just come to terms with that and accepted it, and it's a part of like your way of life now. Like, maybe it's been generations
later, exactly. And it's probably the like the bureaucrats and the politicians of that culture who are still brainwashed in the whole thing, but it's the leadership, and so it's seeped out into the entire population.
The wealthy and the like the people in politics are going to be the ones who have the most access to have physically seen this thing, and therefore been brainwashed.
They consider it like a rite of passage to come see the thing, and then it's like, oh, you're hooked.
They're the ones that make all of the like the politics happen. And then to like a poor farmer, what does it even matter, right? Like, you're just gonna work your farm anyway. Who gives a shit, right? So like some people just don't care.
And it's like it ain't broke, like it's working for them, so why would they complain?
Honestly, I do see it being like a good thing anyway. Because maybe they do have some level of ability to control these things, and that other ones don't, so they can bring back living ones and have some kind of at least functional relationship with them. Maybe like, you know, they're able to control and tame smaller ones and form some kind of bond with them, or tell them what to do or whatever.
Or at least, at the very least, repel bigger ones. And so it genuinely is like, as much as that's an ominous, scary, evil-sounding thing, maybe it doesn't really actually like present that way. Maybe it's just pretty normal, right? And it's a good thing, and they got something going for them, and that's their shtick. Well, that could be such the cool thing, because to this creature, this is merely a survival thing. Like, the idea of creating symbiotic relationships with other animals is something in the animal kingdom.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like even just outside of like humans with like pets and stuff like that. So yeah, it was just like a defense mechanism initially, but it's the fact that it's found an intelligent species that it kind of can work off of very differently. So it's kind of created its own little hive. And I visually love the idea that whatever this thing was, we'll come up with whatever creature it was eventually, but just assuming whatever this thing was, I love the idea that, they hunted it initially, dragged it back, and at this point, the rest of the body's decayed, but it's just the skull, maybe even with the brain inside, who knows, that's still functioning completely independently without the rest of the body. And so it would be so cool if they do have just this stationary, gigantic skull with like an altar around it, and like all that sort of stuff. That
maybe like on a weird level, like it kind of is still alive. Like they brought it back, and because these things are not like real creatures, it was able to like give up the rest of its body, let it decay, so that the brain can stay alive, and so that like the brain is still in that skull, like at least alive to a certain extent, and it's just given up on like using the resources and the energy to keep the rest of the body alive, and so it's still alive, and that's how it's kind of able to get this this power over people.
Well, even just think of this, like what if the example of the city of golems, like we were thinking that is almost built on top of the golem. The golem's decaying, slowly, if at all. You know what I mean? Like these things almost appear to be like, again, like they're not subject to entropy in the same way that most things are.
Yeah.
And so maybe they did hunt this thing and start to use the bits of it, but it doesn't need the rest of its body to survive.
Yeah.
Because it's using the minds of the people who it connects with as a host for its own consciousness.
Yeah.
You see what I mean?
Yeah,
so
that's very interesting.
even if its body is still alive, its consciousness is still hosted within everyone around it, and so it's alive, and it's its mechanism to stay alive to have these people constantly under its will.
It's like Santa. Oh my. He's only able to do his stuff
Is
because
Santa
kids believe in him.
Is Santa a kaiju?
Yes. Yes. Anyway,
Incredible.
that's a dope idea, though.
Yeah.
I absolutely like that.
Definitely.
I just couldn't resist the Santa thing.
No kidding, that's
Y'all
incredible.
ever see Elf? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but yeah, so that's such a cool concept for an original. Just one of them, and it's probably the city-state that sits on the very fringe in the first place.
Yeah,
They can exist out there because they don't have to worry about these things. They take in the small to medium ones, and the bigger ones just don't fuck with it.
Yeah. And it also gets them to have a whole lot more access to be able to, like, bring in these beneficial ones. Because how are you going to, like, if you're right smack dab in the center of this whole schwack of city-states, how are you possibly going to convince anybody to, like, I'm just going to bring back these guys, like these cool little creatures I found in the woods? And they're like, no, dude, no, you're not bringing a bunch of these things through my borders. No.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, totally.
Yeah, if they're the fringe one, they definitely get a lot of benefits from having that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely a cool idea for one.
Yeah.
I did have a couple ideas, merely just ideas, almost only in name for two of them, and then I think just kind of a creature idea for a third. But so I was thinking, we don't have a crab yet.
We don't have a crab yet.
I want a crab.
Shh, bring a crab, let's do it.
I was going to call it something like the Wandering Mountain.
Okay.
And it's a crab with an entire ass mountain
Like
on its back.
like a hermit crab, like one of those like big old spiky ones or whatever.
Yeah.
And just like plunks down and then it's encased in a mountain.
Yeah, it's the entire fucking mountain.
Okay.
And so that was the idea, and then maybe, and it was also kind of a cool idea because like it's one of these city-states, but it probably moves.
Ah.
You see what I mean? It moves consistently.
So people
and
live on this thing.
People live on the mountain.
I see what you're saying. Okay. I really like the idea. How did this work before? Like, did they become like a city after they had moved onto this mountain, or like had they been on it the whole time? And then
I see what you mean, because if we're thinking there was a conflict that separated this from the other stuff, why are they on this thing all of a sudden?
But I did have the idea that, like, the way that we'd set this up is that, see, this is why you gotta think of the core ideas of your world beforehand, so that you can do stuff, the little mental gymnastics like I'm about to now. We had agreed that these things can sprout up anywhere and anywhere, or anywhere and everywhere, in various sizes because of the way that the magic works, and these things sort of just like apparate into magical things, and they can like, what if they had always been on a mountain, and then there was like a crazy magic spike that then caused this creature to come up on the inside of this mountain, and it's big enough and strong enough that it's like
it stood up,
yeah,
and then whoa,
yeah.
That's definitely a cool idea. I know we have a little bit of our sort of Badlands area as well, and so one thing that that sticks out to me as the area where this would happen, for a few reasons. The first one that popped into my mind is the fact that we were talking about in these sort of Badlands, there's just constant flooding, and the landscape is constantly changing. So how do you put a city there?
Yeah.
How do you have any level of civilization that actually manages to stick without a huge level of infrastructure that you do not have the resources for because you barely have farmland? You can't do it. And so the idea of a wandering city where that's its sort of territory sticks out to me. Secondly, floods, water.
Yep.
And we were thinking it's incredibly muddy as well, which is another thing that crabs sort of like, is to actually just be able to burrow.
Yeah.
And so it kind of ties, because it's the magic essence of the area that translates into what the beast becomes, and so that sticks out to me as something that would spawn into a crab, and it's not out of left field either for this thing to just be a crab. Like, it's like, okay, it's a mountain. why is it an aquatic, at
Yeah.
least a semi-aquatic creature? But the fact that there is a lot of mud and water, at least at certain parts
Gave
of
it
the year.
core idea of what it was going to form, right?
Exactly, and so yeah, there's the fact that this city would need to be mobile or on top of something for it to not be swept away immediately,
Yeah.
and then it's also the fact that that would make sense with the crab.
Yeah.
So that was one idea I had. It was purely mountain crab, and so yeah, it's all expanding.
I
out from
really
there.
like the idea. So are these, not that they necessarily have to, you know, hate all of these monsters to the level where they want to destroy the thing that's kind of keeping them like viable as a city. Are they chill with it? You know what I mean? Like, because if these are kind of a people whose culture has always been to fight these things off and fend these things off, when one sort of like basically takes over their city, are they chill with it? Are they not very chill with it? What's the vibe of the people that are living on this kind of thing? What is their relationship?
Well, so we were sort of thinking that there's the separatist ones that they each have their sort of own identity, but their identity was also sort of steeped in using these monsters to their advantage.
Yeah.
Most of the time, probably dead.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to stick too many that have like a symbiotic relationship with theirs. Maybe it's kind of a mixed relationship because this thing is protecting them from floods, moving constantly, which gives them a defensive advantage, but also they don't have control over it.
Yeah.
So that would be sort of interesting too, is because this thing gets up, moves whenever it wants, burrows itself into the mud, probably on yearly or bi-yearly, just kind of whenever, but whenever it rains, and the possibility of like moving over to a new fresh little batch of mud and sticking itself in. But they don't have control whether they can touch the ground.
Yeah.
They need to, as soon as the crab sits down, they're like, all right, it's time. We have
Anybody
to go
who
develop
wants to-
resources.
yeah.
Anyone who wants to trade, anyone
Yeah.
who wants to go do this, that, or
Yeah.
the other thing, go do it.
Yeah.
And hope this thing didn't get uncomfortable in 35 minutes.
Yeah.
And then stand up and then leave again. And then you have to have a party of people like, wait!
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's like, it's providing certain advantages, but also this city is completely autonomous of its people. And so it's sort of a mixed relationship rather than this sort of semi-symbiotic / controlling one of the telepathic one.
Yeah.
So it's it differentiates it a little bit. And then so the other idea I had was mostly based on a name and kind of a concept. So we can kind of use whatever sort of animal basis we want. But I think the name of it was going to be something like the Innumerable Maw.
Okay.
It's something. It's a big mouth with big and tons of
Right.
teeth.
Okay.
That's the thing. And they killed it. They've hunted this thing.
Okay.
But it's got thousands and thousands of teeth, and they use them to craft like swords and weapons, and they're
absolutely.
magical in that way. The teeth themselves have become a commodity and a limited resource, but there's lots. And so that was basically the whole concept. I'm like, could be like, I don't know, like a giant, could be a crocodile.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Could be a crocodile or like a shark.
Yeah.
Probably a crocodile. But I was thinking, like, could be a lion? I don't know.
Yeah.
But the whole idea is that whatever this thing is, it's got this gigantic fucking mouth that's just filled with teeth. Probably big, but for its size, small. You know what I mean?
I feel like when I think of a lot of teeth, that something like a shark in the real world pops up, because they've got something like 3 rows of teeth or something like that. They got a lot of teeth. That's kind of a thing they've got. And then if this is a magically, entropically boosted creature, then it could have thousands of teeth.
Yeah.
And so shark does kind of jump out at me, and that could give us one of the
aquatic
ones
one.
that's going to be like on the coast.
Yeah,
Because
true,
there
true,
are a
true,
handful
true.
that are on the coast, and so
Yeah.
that's a cool way to kind of create an identity for one that is on the coast. If we've already got a Badlands on the northern fringe, it kind of gives it a little bit of an extra direction.
The shark is an interesting idea because, yeah, it adds an aquatic one. And so we have, firstly, that's something that isn't the dragon turtle. So that adds another like aquatic one, which I really like. We've kind of established the idea that these things can sort of, in rare cases, and this one's not going to be alive, it's going to be dead, but the other one is still alive by like its telepathic hosting. But what if this thing, it's dead, and they have its mouth open and they harvest from it, but it, like a shark, because a shark loses its tooth, it just grows a new one.
Yeah.
what if that's still happening despite the fact that it's dead? Like, its bodily functions are still it's the opposite. It's like of the telepathic one. Its mind and body is technically dead, but a lot of the functions are still, and maybe it's even slowing down. Like, it's dying, but it's just like, it's the process, like how this is a myth, but they say like, oh, your fingernails still keep growing.
The exact same thing,
that's because your skin recedes, but that could be a cool concept, is like, its teeth, keep manifesting and they keep pulling it out. But also what makes me think is like, what other bodily functions could they use? Because another thing about sharks, people study them in regards to like cancer research as well, because sharks can't get cancer. Maybe I'm wrong.
I didn't know that. That's really cool.
I'm pretty sure I'm correct on that. But yeah, they don't get cancer of any type. So
I'll do what I can to fact check you on that one. But that might be tough.
Stem cell scientists, get on it.
It should honestly, like, you could probably just Google it and find the answer, because I've seen it a few times. And, you know, don't believe everything you see on the internet, but I choose to believe this one. But so, I don't know, maybe there's like some sort of, maybe they're using other parts of it as well that like kind of keep growing back or something like that. The teeth, definitely.
There's, I don't know exactly how it's called. It's like ambergris or something like that. It's something like the fat of a whale or something like that. But is an incredibly valuable resource in the real world. And maybe there's something like that as well, is like and probably that is not something that's going to regenerate, but another different resource that they could have harvested as some sort of immensely valuable resource as well that has come from this creature. And maybe that does have some sort of magical power as well, like, you know, minor or major, but
even if you just turn it into like a type of like lamp oil or something like that, but it's a resource nonetheless. We don't have to go with that. The teeth one's necessary. The rest of it maybe we can come up with later. But yeah, definitely I really wanted the idea of basically just like fucking tooth swords. Like, that was it. Like, they've just equipped their entire military with these swords that are advantageous for whatever reason. Like, maybe they're just like super hard and unbreakable or something like that.
Hear me out.
Okay.
What if this is, like you had mentioned, slowing down?
Okay.
And it's slowing down to the point where now they're like, it has stopped or is about to stop. And so there's that immense amount of pressure and like expectation that the thing that we've had going for us for the last, you know, 200 years or whatever is dried up or is drying up very rapidly. What are we doing to secure our foothold, our relevance, our power? So that it adds a little bit more pressure, because maybe a lot of these things, these city-states still have things going for them, and this one had a big thing going for it, but is now they're staring down the barrel of like, that has ran dry. I considered that idea, and my initial thought that could be interesting is just sort of, again, like a little bit of a plot that's sort of happening there, is the fact that like there's rumors about it slowing down or stopping, but the general populace doesn't actually understand. But there's the people in power of this place do understand that it's going wrong, and they're trying to keep it a secret as best they can to stop, to not have political opportunists or warlords, neighboring people saying, hey, now's my time then.
Exactly. And also not have their population panic or defect at the same time. And so like there's that sort of tension of like rumors going around about the maw drying up, and like it's just is it just a coincidence that they've hired Leviathan hunters to check our shores? Like, what's the deal with that? And it's like, like there's some sort of cover story, like, no, we just want more. This one's fine, but what if we had more of them? Or like we want to increase our might in another way. Think of the possibilities, like. And so there's this sort of weird tension that way.
Political intrigue.
Yes, do it. Well, yeah, it's kind of the root of the feeling of almost any place, is like, okay, what's the relationship with the people and what's happening?
Yeah, top-down politics.
Yeah.
Because that is seriously so much of like the average person's life is like, what the hell is going on in your country? Like, if you've got some crazy shit happening in your government, or you know, the stabilizing power that controls your nation, you'll feel it. You'll feel it right down to the last person. Love me some political intrigue, especially when you've got this shitty little collection of city-states that are so close and so bickering.
Yeah. And warring and stuff like that. It could be a cool little plot line or just something, because it's that politics that, like, again, if you have a set of players that walk into this city, those are the plot hooks.
Yeah.
Even if it's not overtly political, if it's just some sort, there's always a higher up, whether it's government or not, there's a higher up thing that's happening that's driving the interactions you have on a small scale. Yeah.
I am so excited to get into, like, once we've gone, miles down the road and have, like, political entities for each one of these city-states. Mm-hmm. I love that. I love that stuff. I love the, like, just the politicking. That's super interesting and entertaining to me in books and stories and stuff like that.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. But that was all the sort of ideas I had, at least for now, on just, like, again, little monsters that had popped into my head. We fleshed them out pretty well.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think that we've kind of given the core identity to a handful here, as well as sort of just made a little bit of an idea for political intrigue and the powers that be for the city-states here. What do you think? Next time, do you want to discuss a little bit more of the factions or the governments or something like that for these guys? Or?
I think we'll be sticking around in the city-states area, but I think let's just see what happens when it comes down to the discussion.
Sounds good.
But
all right, in that case, then see you next time. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in. Hey, welcome to the end card. Thanks for watching the episode. But we have a few comments to go through, and we have a few more than last time, so here we go.
So the first one from Curious Bench says, "Oh man, I missed a few episodes. I'll come back after catching up." We'll wait.
As long as it takes.
And then when you get here, hey, thanks for watching.
Hey, welcome back. We have a couple of more in-depth ones, people kind of interacting with the world, which we thought was super cool. We have one from Jim7217 in regards to the cities that we were building. Simvali, he says, canals for transportation, use of canals by criminal enterprises / thieves guild. Love the concept of using magic to supplant technology, possibly aquamancers that concentrate the movement / use of water for general good, the general good of the people and farming community. Super cool idea. Then we also have Steinbolter, which he said, love the golem concepts. Can make for some really cool party... Sorry, I'm horrible at reading out loud. Can make some really cool party plot points and story ideas. My thought of golem stone carvers that are adding artistic representative patterns all over the city block by block. Really awesome. A growth of crime due to tremendous wealth, and that is utilizing magic that temporarily shuts down the golem abilities to avoid being pummeled by them, or utilizing golems themselves to steal. That is kind of an interesting thought, like the idea that, well, just people are bored and don't have anything to do, so they just are like, well, guess I'll crime.
Yeah.
It is kind of a cool idea to just on, again, just how things unfold if you have a world this way, and it is really cool to see other people's interpretations of our ideas. So thank you, Jim. That was really cool.
Hearing the ideas that people have in regards to what we were just talking about. That's it's been really trippy to see. In quick rebuttal for the Simvali Canals thing, it hadn't really crossed my mind because with the capital city, I had like the image of that being like the canals thing. So I hadn't really put a whole lot of thought into the canals. But definitely, I absolutely agree with the ideas for sure.
Yeah, I do like the idea that maybe the underbelly of Steinbolter is getting a little bit full of crime and stuff like that, and maybe the distance between the upper class people who have these really, really intricate golems and the lower class is maybe even starting to separate a little bit and become further away. We'll see if that actually makes its way into the total canon. But yeah, thank you, Jim.
Now I've got another one here from Bari Bars Boldia 197. So in my world, there's an isthmus connecting two continents, and to gain a monopoly over trade routes, a kingdom by the name of Briun, or Brijan, probably Briun, They heavily tax the traders there with numerous outposts along the land to ensure as much money is fee to the kingdom as possible. Could this logically make for a very rich kingdom and peoples, as well as could this even work at all? Absolutely. I actually ended up getting like a little carried away with my very wordy response to this one. But in short form, definitely. You know, if you look at a couple of real world examples, like the two major ones that you see are, well, I mean, they're canals, but the Suez Canal and the Panama Canal, huge for their economy, huge for their economy. So absolutely, it's definitely a way that can make a kingdom very rich and therefore powerful. And I mentioned in my comment that to sort of put forward to your players or to your readers just how important this is and that this is such a huge source of their income and therefore their power, show it a little bit by having, you know, if it's a thin isthmus, you could have like ships kind of constantly going by as a patrol, or like just describe how many or impending the forces or the fortresses are, so that people just kind of at a snap are like, oh yeah, I understand that this is very important to people, very important to this country, and that kind of projects the idea of just how important this is and how powerful and wealthy it makes a person by how much you accentuate they force their control of this.
Yeah, totally. No, it's such a cool idea. And then we had finally one from Quartz Chrysalis. The almighty Algo sent me here. I'm going to watch this from the start. Praise the Algo. Praise Lord Algo. Thank you very much, Quartz. Yeah. We see a couple other comments, and so it's really cool to see that you actually did end up going back and did indeed watch watch the rest. So thank you very much.
And thank you, Algo, as well.
Speaking of Algo, so remember to like and subscribe, and follow us on our Spotify and Instagram. Another way to get into one of these slates is if you actually wanted to message us on Instagram, so keep that in mind as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.